Arweinydd grŵp UKIP.
Leader of the UKIP group, Neil Hamilton.
I'd like to continue this line of questioning with the First Minister, if I may. Is it not a tragedy that the Circuit of Wales project appears to have been strangled, not because of any credible doubts about the viability of the racetrack project, because there was nothing in the Cabinet Secretary's statement to that effect, but because of a technical internal accounting device by Her Majesty's Treasury and the Office for National Statistics? Shouldn't we look through the form of the accounts to the substance of the project? It's an entirely private sector funded project up front. All the Welsh Government was asked for was a guarantee for which they would be paid £3 million a year. It was secured on the assets which are to be constructed because the guarantee doesn't even begin until the construction phase is completed, and that 100% of the assets were available to secure what was a loan of less than 50% of the funding. So on the face of it, that appears to be pretty good security. And is there not a way through this, even at this late stage, that we could continue to look at the possibility of untying the Gordian knot with the Treasury and see if there is an imaginative solution to this in accounting terms, which would enable the private sector money to be put in, which, on balance, I think would be better than for the Welsh Government to have to commit its own money up front, which is now what is proposed?
The issue is this, isn't it? The problem has always been that if this project had strong support from private investors, it wouldn't need a guarantee from the government, and it would be able to stand on its own 2 feet without that guarantee. As we said in the Chamber last week, the difficulty that we have faced is that no final decision will be given by the ONS or Eurostat as to whether this financial deal will be on or off the balance sheet until the contracts are signed, by which case it's too late. And of course, at that point, we are in a position where, in 2 years, 3 years' time, if the circuit didn't work out, the guarantee is called on. That is the problem with this. Now, we cannot take that risk. We know that we would not get a final decision from them. The fact that, as the deal is currently structured, it does not appear to have met our conditions. If a new proposal comes forward, then of course we'd examine it. But we cannot take the risk with public money and take the risk of this money appearing on our balance sheet. If that were to happen, we would be treated as if we had already paid that money over, and the money would be cut from our capital budget, which would mean, for example, potentially having to make cuts in this financial year. Now, that's not something that we, as a responsible government, can take a risk with.
I fully understand that point, and that, of course, was included in the original statement. But the idea that a project which would be funded privately to the tune of £375 million, a guarantee on the part of the Welsh Government, which would cover less than half of that, could be put on the Welsh Government's books as entirely a public sector project is self-evidently ridiculous, and therefore there must be a way through this. The Welsh Government guarantee would never be called upon up front in any event under the terms of the deal, because it's an annual amount which the government would be obliged to pay in the worst case scenario, that the assets were built, that the racetrack itself never made a penny of profits so as to pay the interest to the investors, Aviva in this particular instance, and then the government would be called upon on an annual basis to pay that element of the guarantee to them. You will never be called upon to provide £210 million in a single lump sum, and the £8 million worst case guarantee is amortised over a period of 35 years. I mean, it's absolutely preposterous that these government accounting conventions should be used to frustrate a project which would utterly transform the whole of South East Wales. And surely the Welsh Government ought to exert itself, strain every sinew to try and find a way through.
We cannot ignore the reality of the fact that there is a high risk, in our judgment, that we would see £373 million lost to the Welsh capital budget. That is something that cannot be, that no responsible government could ignore. I come back to the point. If the project was able to stand on its own, this is not a government project. This is a project that's come forward from a private consortium. The question that has never been answered is why the project can't stand on its own 2 feet. If it is deemed to be that successful by private investors, then people will ask the question why that is. We have worked, of course, with the business. They've brought forward several schemes over the past few years, and we've tried to help them in any way, but they did not meet our conditions that we set down. We've examined all the risks, and it's quite clear that the risks are too high to proceed with this scheme.
But not too high, apparently, to conjure up £100 million out of the back pocket as a reaction to this failure. And if it's possible to find £100 million up front, effectively now, why is it impossible to find £8 million a year from 2 to 3 years' time for the following 30 years? Surely, I repeat the question, with an ounce of imagination, there must be a way through this, and the Welsh Government would have the united support, I think, of all the parties in this Assembly behind it to make this project succeed. Surely the prize is too great to give up at this stage.
It is the responsibility of the circuit to bring forward any new proposals of the Welsh Government. This is not a Welsh Government scheme. The circuit were given conditions that they had to meet. They did not meet those conditions when we looked at the due diligence. He says £100 million out of the back pocket is £100 million over 10 years. So not suddenly £100 million in the space of 1 year. That is the commitment that we make to Ebbw Vale to bring the jobs to the technology park, and we are confident, having spoken to businesses, that that technology park will be a success.
Question 3, John.